Some say Pritchard went into hiding after some weird, random Australian man called him out for something or other. Other people say he was the mastermind behind everything that Cameron Jeffers ever does, and he should be punished, and he's gone into hiding. Well, none of that's true. It's me, Chris Pritchard. Welcome back to the Chris Pritchard Cycling News Show. Finally. Hey. Alright, so first things first, before we get into the show, let me try and explain exactly where I've been and why we haven't been uploading videos on the channel. I'm currently working with Wahoo and Zwift on the brand new Crank It Up tour. We're visiting 13 cities over the next 4 weeks around Scandinavia and Europe, and we're putting on, well, pretty good shows to be honest. We're taking the forward KOM on Zwift, we're using the full ecosystem that Wahoo has to offer, and we're letting the riders fight it out to see who can be the fastest up the forward KOM. The fastest on the night, both men and women, take home a... Listen, this is not an advert for it, I'm just telling you what it is. They take a brand new kicker home. So check the dates down below in the description and see if we're coming to a city near you over the next few weeks. If we are, please make the effort to come down. Not if you're a troll. Don't even, no, don't bother. They don't leave the house, do they? Cool. So if you're interested in coming down, then check out the dates, go and get your tickets. It's free, but you just need to go and get a ticket because there's like free alcohol and stuff and free food, free entertainment as well. So, you know, if you want to win a kicker or you want to try and attempt to win a kicker, then why don't you come down? That's why I've not been producing videos for the last few days, weeks, I guess now. But anyway, I'm back in the office for a day, so I thought, hey, lots going off in the world of cycling. I just want to talk about 2 stories, and then let's go into the comments section of the last video I put up, and also the Cameron Jeffers comment section in his latest video. Just for shits and giggles, really. What have I forgot? Transition. So today marks the day that we've seen the brand new route for the 2020 Tour de France, and oh my god, it was crazy. Lots of crazy things to talk about in that. We're going to talk about that later, but first let's talk about this story of Chris Froome saying that Bernard? Who the f*** is Bernard? Egan Bernal is definitely going to support him in next year's Tour de France. According to Cycling Weekly, Froome has hinted that Ineos will once again give the strongest rider team leadership responsibilities, whoever that may. So that headline is very misleading in the fact that Chris Froome says Egan Bernal will support him at 2020 Tour de France. Now he's not really saying that, is he? He's saying, well, whoever's the strongest rider is going to be supported. But let's be honest, do we think it's going to be Chris Froome? Come on. I just can't see how a 34-year-old, granted, not that old in terms of cycling, but how a 34-year-old, after suffering a major injury, is going to get back to the form he was on. Now, obviously, we saw G crash at the Tour de Suisse. It was a shorter time period of recovery, but even that crash that put him out of the Tour de Suisse, but allowed him to race at the Tour de France, it was detrimental to his overall Tour de France. And I think, had he not crashed there, it would have been in a much better position, a much stronger position to actually be that race leader as opposed to having to, well, ultimately support Bernard. And I've got a feeling this is going to be the same. I don't think Listen, Froome is one of the greatest cyclists of all time, whether he's clean or not, I don't give a monkey's, right? He's an amazing cyclist, but I think he needs to go into that Tour de France next year and say, you know what? Unless... well, it's roles reversed, isn't it? 2018, G went into the Tour de France to support Chris Froome. That was it. There was no other role for him to play. If it was there or thereabouts, maybe he could get a top 10, but ultimately he was there to support Chris Froome. Now 2020 rolls around, the winner of the 2019 edition should get preferential treatment. The kid is a superstar. The kid can do things that other people can't do. So ultimately I think that Team Ineos should say, listen Froomey, you're playing second fiddle. This guy's proven himself. He wasn't laid on the floor pretending to be injured last year, all right? He was legit, he was there, he was fighting, he was dominating. So you, son, you can support him. And if anything changes, or you find yourself up the road, and Bernard there has a crash, then go for it. You're now the race leader. But ultimately, as we go into this Tour de France, you need to play second fiddle, son, all right? Leave your comments down below. In fact, if these two were on opposing... I don't know why I'm asking you because I know the answer, but let me ask you anyway. If these two riders were on opposing teams and they met head to head at next year's Tour de France, who would come out on top? Bearing in mind next year's Tour de France has one individual time trial. And not only that, it comes at stage 20 and it's an uphill time trial to La Planche de Belleville. All right, and I guess that segues us nicely into the next story, which is the 2020 Tour de France route has been revealed today. And the biggest headlines for me out of it are stage 2 and stage 20. We'll take a look at the overall route first. So the 2020 Tour de France is going to start on the 27th of June. The Grand Depart is in Nice, and the race hangs around Nice for the first 3 stages. Once finished in Nice, it then heads inland, slightly north, and then back west all the way down to the Pyrenees. From the Pyrenees, it's a short flight up to the most western part of the route before it heads back inland all the way across the centre of France, right into the heart of the Alps. The route then winds itself from the Alps all the way up north to Lure, where we'll see the only individual time trial. From there again, short hop on the aeroplane, and then the riders will be heading straight into Paris on stage 21 and the 19th of July. Now next year's Tour de France is going to be all about the climbers because of the lack of individual time trials, and especially the only one that comes right at the end, and it also goes up La Planche de Belleville. You need to be a climber to complete that. Potentially we might see riders swapping bikes out when they get to the foot of that climb, but ultimately it's a time trial of 2 halves, a nice flat fast half, and then we're going to be rolling up and down those hills before we get to that final climb in the second half. Potentially, yeah, we could see riders somehow working on their racecraft of how they can switch bikes as quickly and as efficiently as possible to one, not lose as much time as they can, but also to make that deficit up and then start making time up on that final climb rather than climbing on a time trial bike. But hey, still a long way to go. I bet they've not even thought about that yet. As usual, 21 stages broken down into 9 flat stages, 3 hilly stages, 8 mountainous stages, and then obviously that one individual time trial. They're going to cover 3,302 kilometers of racing this year. Now, like I said earlier, I believe that there's 2 stages that are quite pivotal to this Tour de France, and they kind of bookend it. We've got stage 2 and we've got stage 20. Now, before we look at stage 2, let's take a look at stage 20. Now, I've just mentioned that riders might be looking to try and change their bike on this time trial because of the final ascent up to La Planche de Belleville. This is a race against the clock, and I don't believe when we get to this stage we'll have a clear-cut winner of this year's Tour de France. I believe that everybody will be fighting for every single second come this final ascent. I believe the final ascent of the Tour de France is where it's going to be won and lost. And it sounds stupid, but what I'm trying to say is that I don't think there'll be a big enough time gap for people to be able to go a little bit easier. I genuinely feel that this could be one of the closest Tour de France's we have ever seen, especially when we get to this point here, because they're not going to want to be showing their hands too soon with this individual time trial, because once you're out there on your own, you can go as hard or as easy as you want. It's not a matter of trying to bluff everybody into thinking that you are strong or you're not feeling that strong. When it's just you against the clock, you've got to go full gas, and we will see who still has some gas to give at stage 20 before they head into Paris. And yeah, I think that is going to be the most pivotal point, because that is, we can't do anything after this. Once this has been done, we're heading into Paris and the results will be known. On the other end of the scale, you've got stage 2. Now, stage 2 is going to see the riders climbing over 1,500 meters. And at this point in the Tour de France, on stage 2, it is a first that the riders are going to have to ascend that many meters this early on in the Tour de France. Now, not the hardest of climbs, not the most impossible of climbs. Riders are going to be feeling fresh. I've got a feeling that a lot of the GC riders won't want to take that yellow jersey. They could easily do it, and they could rip the race apart there and then, but it's too early to have to defend that yellow jersey for that long. And with climbs, you could see bigger time gaps, which aren't going to allow other riders to get back into that yellow jersey. So I've got a feeling that they're going to want a breakaway to go away. Someone who's not likely to be winning that overall and not even anywhere near the top 50 overall come the end of the race. They're going to want that break to go away, let them have the glory, let them take the yellow jersey and just hold on to it for a few days until the favourites get into the Pyrenees. And that's where you'll see the winners and the GC contenders coming to the floor and wanting that yellow jersey. I just think it's too early. I think it's a great idea to put that many meters of climbing that early on in a Tour de France. It's going to encourage some people who potentially might get away, who potentially wouldn't finish in the top 10, to be able to do that by being really aggressive on this second stage. But leave your comments down below. What do you think to this overall route? Do you think it's built solely for the Colombians? Do you think anyone has a chance of winning this Tour other than a Colombian? How do you think Jumbo-Visma are going to get on in next year's Tour de France? Do you feel that we need more individual time trials or less, or are we missing a team time trial? What's it missing? What's it got? What's it got too much of? What's it not got enough of? Just whatever. Just leave your comments down below. All right, and next up, let's talk about the... Listen, right? The video I put out last about Cameron Jeffers, you've got to understand from my point of view. Don't look at it from your point of view. Look at it from my point of view, right? Cameron Jeffers is a very dear friend of mine. Whether I had his back or I didn't, I was going to get hassle either way. If I'd had his back and tried to justify his answers, you would have jumped on that bandwagon and said, stop trying to justify a cheat, blah, blah, blah. And if I'd have not, you would have jumped on my back for saying, why aren't you sticking behind your friend? Fucking loser, backstabber, blah, blah, blah. So I couldn't win in that situation. But everything's died down a little bit now. Let's take a look at some of those comments that you left me. Wait, I will say this before we get into the comments though, and I feel like this might be one of the reasons why people were so triggered by this, especially those in the Zwift community, is the fact that to get that Tron bike requires a lot of time and a lot of effort, and you have to climb the mountains to get it. You have to acquire like 50,000 meters of climbing to get this bike. So there must be a real sense of achievement for people when they actually get this bike. It must feel pretty good to go, actually, I burned all these calories, I climbed all those meters, and for that, I get this bike. When you think about it, right, as a fat cyclist and someone who doesn't climb very well, it will require more effort from me to do that than it would from a climber. So, like, why can't I be challenged to a challenge that I want to do and enjoy doing and get benefit out of it to acquire the same bike? Think about it, right? If you class yourself as a rouleur or a climber or a sprinter, shouldn't we all have slightly different challenges to be able to acquire that same bike? Because I know when I go on Zwift that I avoid the hills at all costs, which means for me to actually acquire the Tron bike, it's going to take... I'd probably never do it. Yet I want to be able to experience the Tron bike. And here's another thing, right, that could trigger World War III, I don't know. How many people... Shall I? Yeah. How many people that raced to the top of every climb and acquired 50,000 meters of climbing did it on 100% trainer difficulty? See ya. Think about it. If you're flattening those hills off, are you really climbing those meters that you said you're climbing? Discuss down in the comments below. Right, let's get on to the comments. First up, Eric Kaufman. Hopefully Zwift will ban Cam's account on just the principle of cheating. I've read where it's taken people a year or more to get that unlock. Kind of my point exactly. Like, Zwift, give us a challenge for a ruler or a sprinter. Right, the sprinter challenge might be you have to cover, you know, X amount of kilometers on flat roads. Or you just have to cover X amount of kilometers to acquire that bike. As a rouleur, you have to acquire X amount of kilometers on certain routes to acquire said bike. I am surprised that Zwift literally did nothing with Cameron's account. Not that I want them to ban him, because I don't, but you'd thought that the only technical rule that was broken throughout all that, dodgy ground, eh? The only rule that was ever technically broken prior to them putting them in place was the terms of service of Zwift. And the only place he's not been punished is on Zwift. So he's been banned from racing on the road, yet he can still jump on Zwift and race. Matt Baker, I love what you do, Pritch, but I feel a lot of people are going to be wondering about what happened to Jesper regarding CyclingHub. Anyway, keep up the good work. Now, it's not my place. Well, I suppose it is my place because I work for CyclingHub. To let you know that Jesper decided that he no longer wanted to be part of CyclingHub, and and relinquished his ownership of CyclingHub. Nothing really needs more to be said on that. As far as CyclingHub's concerned, Jesper stepped away from the company. He has no ownership, no affiliation with the company anymore. And that's that. Nicholas Hume. Be careful logging into Zwift from all those different locations over a short period of time. Apparently, that gives you a license to leap to massive conclusions and make Alpe d'Huez a molehill. Cracking comment. I absolutely love that one. Yes, this whole conspiracy over the fact that he logged in from various different locations trying to hide his rides. None of that was the case. I think it's clear, you know, especially when Jesper did the tests for our channel, that they were all done offline. There's no point going online and spoiling other people's. And I know you're going to go, oh, that's so Christian of you. No, that's not the case. Clearly, you don't want to be sat there doing your tests out on Zwift, on Watopia, or wherever it is, holding a constant wattage and just flying past people, because I know how much it annoys them. So do them offline. Then you can set your parameters to whatever you want, and then just delete the ride afterwards. Now, this whole deleting of rides to try and hide them was clearly not the case of trying to hide them to get away from anyone finding out, but just the fact that they're not relevant to anybody. Then they don't mean anything. Those stats were never physically done, so what's the point in keeping them, uploading to your Strava, uploading to your Training Peaks? What was the point in it? Next up, Will said, to be honest, I am being polite here, British cycling, country bunts, and more particularly, cough, the weasel who sent the email. You'll get yours one day, son. Now, we still don't know who was the whistleblower, the Edward Snowden of the Zwift world. We don't know who that was. They'll think that what they did was fair and righteous, and they'll be the only one stood there. But that's fair enough. It is what it is. I mean, some people just haven't got anything else better to do in their lives, have they? Anyway, we are done for another show. Hope you enjoyed that one. A little bit shorter than usual. I'm just getting back into this thing. I'm away next week for the Wahoo tour of... Where am I going next week? I don't even know. Oh, Brussels. We're heading to Brussels, we're heading to Paris, and we're heading to Barcelona. So if you're in one of those regions, close by one of those cities, make sure you check out the events on Facebook. I'll leave the links down in the description. Go and hit them up. Come and join us down at one of the parties. Free beer, free food, chance to win a kicker. Who don't want to be part of that? And until next time, hesh.